All right. Wow. Goodness me, we made it to the final plenary of Peace Week. It is day 7 of Peace Week, and we've made it to the evening plenary. And this is what a beautiful one to finish up on after just a glorious day today, honoring the seventh core need of manifesting potential and beautiful coherence pulse we just had here in the room. And now the final plenary, reimagining value to serve life. We have a beautiful panel lined up here. It's going to be hosted by Anna Marie Vahova and Cara Stonehouse, with guests Sara McCrum, Marc Epstein, and Emanuel Kuntzelman. Welcome, everybody, to Peace Week and the final plenary.
Woo!
There we
Yeah.
go. Thank you
Anna
so
Marie,
much, Ben.
yeah, so Anna Marie, over to you to this very significant conversation about reimagining value to serve life.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you all for being here. I'm calling in from Vreeland in the Netherlands, just to place myself somewhere in this beautiful world, this beautiful earth. And when we speak about reimagining value to support life or to serve life, for me, it's also very much about serving it from the heart and in a regenerative way. So seeing how we can really, as a foundational key to transforming the world towards peace and ecological regeneration, is a major shift in our relationship to how we perceive value and how we relate to money, individually and collectively, and as people, and also how we organize ourselves. So the governance around money, and how can we do that led by the heart, in a heart-centered way. That's very much our topic at the Hague Center for Global Governance, Innovation and Emergence. And that is one of the reasons why we have been exploring and are still continuing to explore how we can bring this further into the world. And I'm very happy to be here with people that have been already for decades also looking into this with a lot of practice, humbleness, courageous ways of working, and really fundamentally looking at this part. I'd like to hand over to Cara, with whom I'm going to be co-facilitating this evening, or actually serving the conversation, because I would really like us to have a conversation with each other. And Cara has been doing amazing work in Peace Week, but also in bringing us here together whilst I was away in Poland, in Auschwitz, doing work there. So Cara, thank you for all that and for holding our thread. And please let me hand it over to you to further introduce us before we hand over to our guests.
Good. Oh, thank you so much. I'm really excited about this session because as we think about emergence and being like the bees or the ants, that there is some structure that's needed to co-create on, and how we share value and information is a big part of that structure. And I'm just really excited to bring more clarity and focus into this area of how we can manifest our potential by reimagining the value through life. So we're so excited that we've been co-creating with Sara McCrum recently at the Hague Center, to looking at integrating the shadow side of money, and how do we bring the energy of money with love into our life. So Sara McCrum is the author of the book called Love is Money. Love Money, Money Loves You, inspired by her communications with the energy of money, and just feeling that, wow, it's so different than sometimes we think about it. And she's also the co-founder of the Love 2 group of companies, and they're bringing large-scale capital to regenerative farming. So she's going to bring those two sides of the inner and the outer into the conversation in how we're resourcing ourselves for the regenerative movement. And Marc, I've had the pleasure of making a case study with recently about this organization called Haifa, and the currency and community called Seeds, and the way that they're imagining governance and currency together, that with the purpose of regeneration, and they're really doing it. They're on the blockchain, they're making software, they're moving seeds, they're giving grants to communities. Those communities are thriving and figuring out how to sell their seeds. And obviously it's not perfect and it's all a big work in process, but it's beautiful and the very thoughtful, thorough, and just amazing. And I really wanted to bring seeds to our community this week to say, oh, these possibilities real for us. And Emanuel Kuntzelman, I think many of us might not be here today without you. You're the author of the book of the Holomovement that has the purpose of working to create a culture with purpose. And you are a major funder of this whole World Unity Week and an evolutionary leader with many of us. And we're just always so warmly welcome to have you all here today. And so I just want to open the conversation with a round and just let each of you sort of just share in the sort of biggest terms, like how your life purpose comes into your work on this, for this big movement of towards peace. Sara, perhaps we can start with you. So.
How my life purpose comes into this movement. Well,
well, how your work? You just talk about your work.
Let's just jump right in there, shall we? Well, actually, you know, my sense of my life purpose, my deepest life purpose, is the liberation of the human spirit, which starts with my own spirit. I guess that longing to feel that inner freedom, inner genuine liberation that my spirit craved after many, many years of being kind of shut in some artificial box that I couldn't see, and I just felt so separated from everything. And because I found myself writing this book called Love Money, Money Loves You, which, as Kara said, was a kind of download. It was a conversation with the energy of money, which I didn't expect to happen. The way that I express that comes in the form of two things. One is teaching people about their relationship with money, because I learned a lot about it from money. But perhaps more significant now is, how do we actually make money work on this planet? So how do we literally reimagine value so that we can value living ecosystems instead of dead trees? How do we value fresh water and clean air more than the things that are not so important for life? And how do we do that at scale in a way that works for grassroots people, the people who actually make the difference, and also works for the financial markets, because that's where the capital is, that's where the big money is. And if we only play with the small money, we can only do small things. But if we play with big money and actually allow that money to be energetically cleaned by doing good things, then we can actually make the world work in a completely different way from how it does at the moment. So that's what I'm doing.
Pass it on to Marc.
Thank you, Sara. I look forward to having a great conversation with you today. And thank you, Kara and Anne-Marie for inviting me. A few years ago, I learned about the movement that is called Seeds and the organization Haifa that has been putting it together. And when I learned about it, it kind of awakened, or it was a very familiar remembrance of all the threads of my life that brought me to that moment. So my background is in mathematics and working in the financial markets in Chicago. But I was always kind of called to a natural living and the soil and the mountains. And my wife and I wound up in North Carolina, and we've got 2 children here. And I have a small veganic farm. And so coming to North Carolina was kind of a calling. It felt like it was calling me here. And the universe conspired to bring me here. And now I have a small farm. And I really have spent a lot of time thinking about soil. I also spent a lot of time listening to kind of the magic messages that come through. And over the last 20 years, the word biochar and what that means, what that carbon fabric means in the soil came through to me many times. And so we learned about making biochar. And then when I thought about the financial markets and how societies work together and think about how that fabric all flows together, it really connected me so that I was absolutely present when Haifa and Seeds showed up in my life. So we'll speak more about that, but Haifa and Seeds is the Seeds Constitution as a community speaks of the purpose to serve the regenerative renaissance by co-creating economic, governance, and financial systems for regenerative and thriving civilizations. And so with that, we're going to explore both seeds and hypha. And thank you, Kara.
Emanuel, please say a few words, and thank you for coming up and showing up so late as well, because we are, of course, already in the midnight
Well,
time.
thank you, Anne-Marie, and thank you all. Pleasure to be here and join you for this all-important discussion. I would say maybe the most important discussion of all, because I feel that the crisis the world is in right now is because we've lost our way in what value really is. And we've been indoctrinated into the materialistic paradigm, and that our efforts in life are transactional. And in fact, the human spirit is much different. And there is a deep seed of altruism and a deep love of money in the heart and soul of all of us. But we've lost our way a little bit, and we've lost sight of that. So I look forward to exploring more of this in the conversation today. Certainly my life purpose has been to find a way that I could give the most back with the talents I have. And as a social entrepreneur over the last 4 decades, it's taken some time and patience, but that's finally coming to fruition. So I just say it does work. And don't give up, and we'll find the seeds, the love, and the money, and make it work for the right cause of liberating humankind from the grasps of materialism. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
And you too, Anne-Marie.
In looking for how we can connect to universal love, to the heart, to coming together in a way, I've been exploring many, many different parts. And of course, money is a thread that goes through things, but I also have been exploring a lot of voluntary contexts and work that we are doing together because we love to do it. And I think that was also part of my upbringing. But I also remember that when I was about 7 or 8, I was living in Malaysia, and there was a civil war going on. And in our household, which was an expat household, but we had we had all kinds of different cultures in our household: Chinese, Malay, Indian, Tamil, and in the way my parents and we went about it, they were all our friends. They were all part of our household. So when the civil war was going on, and there were all these tensions, I can so clearly still feel that I said to myself, this is just one big mistake. If we would really listen to each other, this would not be happening. Why is this happening? So there is this something about always wanting to come together, co-create and work, and money shows up in all kinds of different forms in that context. So finding a way to do it in a way that it doesn't separate us, but that it makes us support us to each and every one of us, bring our spark into form, into life. That's been part of the journey that we've been doing in the Center for Human Emergence and the Hague Center since 2005. And when I met you, Emanuel, you gave a very different perspective with that through Erwin Laszlo and the work that we did there and how you've brought that forth. And then, of course, also here in this context and as an evolutionary leader. And then I joined a room with Sara at a certain point, and that also activated and showed this. There was this sense of, you see, we can do it differently, but we just need to learn. So I'm here also just to learn and to explore, and I have this sense of just trying things out no matter what. So that's why I'm here. And you, Kara?
Yeah. I'm sort of stepping into and discovering my purpose, and I think part of it will be this kind of this artistic leadership, that this sort of a storytelling attractor to this new world that we're creating, and also sort of seeing the new world and being and helping weave it together into a wholeness and a groundedness and a so I'm just very excited and energized to really start contributing in the governance of seeds, as well as maybe like making videos so people understand what it is and how it works and how they can be involved and that sort of thing, and show and like drawing our big path of where we're going and why we're going there, and just drawing people in through music and all the creative ways that pull on the heartstrings, of so that we're reaching out as our seed gets strong enough that then we're ready that we can reach out to more and more mainstream and make our movement more mainstream. So I'd like to invite Sara to take us into a bit of a meditation around that energy of money, just so we can really sink in together to this deep space. And then from there, we'll just let our conversation arise from what it brings up in us and what's the stories that we get invoked to tell with each other. So you're good for that, Sara?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So I'd like to invite you to close your eyes if you wish to. And I'm going to share with you this very beautiful energy of money, the true energy of money that lies behind our financial systems, which is so different from our perception of money. So let's open ourselves to a direct experience of the energy of money. However it shows to you, you will start to feel it, to sense it, because it's an energy that is always present with us. It's very powerful. It's very beautiful. It's an energy of love and of abundance and of generosity. And it's an energy that is a part of our nature and of nature. It's an energy that speaks to our spirit, that calls our souls to experience abundance and joy as we contribute our gifts and our creativity to the well-being of all life. The energy of money is the energy that listens to your deepest requests and desires and fulfills them, sometimes through synchronicities and serendipities, and sometimes over time, as you open to the fulfillment of your greater potential. And you share yourself, your true self, with us, your fellow human beings. Let's feel the qualities of this energy, the sweetness, the true richness of its expression. Let's feel how, when we experience our inner abundance, we naturally resolve the conflicts that we often experience around money. When we experience this energy, it's natural to do good. And it's natural to want to be successful. And it's natural to have proper incentives and rewards for that success. And it's natural to contribute to greater abundance on this planet, in the material world, in our lives. And in this energy, it's possible for everyone to experience abundance. And to do that in a way that is deeply aligned with the natural living system of Earth. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sara. It's natural.
Good. I just invite us to share what comes up and in us from here.
And feel free to unmute yourself and speak, so that we just go in a flow when it's the impulse in you arises instead of us pointing to you.
When I think of the flow and that the energetics of value, I often don't think of the word money. I'm thinking more of community, of outcomes, of feelings. And that's something that is not easily valued by a traditional balance sheet that sees an ancient longleaf pine tree and says it's this many lumber feet, versus it being an ancient longleaf pine tree. And so if we're going to create value, we have to be able to observe value. We have to be able to decide what is value. We have to be able to coordinate and facilitate. And that's kind of the place where I go to when I think about this conversation, is how do we as people coordinate and facilitate to recognize the value that's there, and then to steward it in a way that is for the greatest good of all, from all angles. So that's what came up for me.
Yeah, I'd like to add a few thoughts to that. You know, I think to begin with, it's important to express a kind of disclaimer, or perhaps because when we look around our planet today and we see billions of people in poverty and without services and the means to even look after their basic creature comforts, it seems a little odd to sit here and talk about abundance, and in my case, perhaps altruism. So I first would like to just open by saying, you know, there are many, many ways to find value in our lives. And quite honestly, money is a necessity. Yes, it can be converted to love. Most oftentimes it is not. And with all due respect to all of those people who are suffering who don't have the money and the means to support their lives, we're with you. We want to help you. And we want to work in this together to make this a more equitable, sharing, regenerative society on all accounts. So I just want to dispel the image of old white guys like myself sitting around talking about money, because I'd rather talk about the spirituality of abundance in our hearts and souls and how we can rekindle that and bring that to the fore. Because for so many of us, those are the main resources we have.
Yeah, just go ahead, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you, Emmanuel. It's very important to acknowledge what you just said, and what I've come to recognize, probably through my own spiritual evolution and exploration of this topic. I think for a long time I believed that it was somehow possible, as many of us do probably when we feel quite powerless, that what we can do is change ourselves, and we must do that for sure. If we can't find that abundance inside ourselves, there is absolutely nothing to talk about here. But what I realized in the end was that it's also so important to change the system, or to create systems. We're so used to a system, a predominant system at the moment, and to actually conceive of and design a system that enables power to be actually distributed at a financial level as well as at the level of value, and to actually have a system that enables us to value things in ways that we haven't. So to value what's valuable for life and value what's essential for life, which is often has no economic value at the moment, literally. And that when we create a system that actually does that, that system will work in those places that you're talking about, Emmanuel. It doesn't only work in the Western world. That system, if it's designed properly, will work anywhere in the world, and that it enables the relief of that suffering, literally, because we have a way of working with money and value that respects each human being, respects the value that people create in the world that is so important for us. And so I've come much more to thinking that we must work with the system as well as with ourselves, and that when we bring those two together, we create systems, and we bring people together and expand our consciousness around money at the same time. We can't have a system without the people. We can't have the people without the system. And those two, when they play together, there's something very crunchy, sort of something very engaging that starts to happen when you actually really get to work on that.
Mark, you look so happy.
I have so many thoughts.
I think it's okay if you explain what seed system is a bit, because I think a lot of us have not even heard of it. So just so that we get a sense of how it can do what sort of Sarah's describing. Yeah.
Okay. And first, I wanted to appreciate Kara, because yesterday was the first time I was in a Zoom together with her, and where she was being creative illustrator, unbelievable visual storyteller with a little pen on a electronic world, and it was beautiful because it told the story of the tapestry of what was being discussed, and I just wanted to thank you for that. It was really beautiful yesterday. So let me just describe briefly the seeds ecosystem, but in particular, the component called the Tao that I believe is so central to what we can achieve and how we can move towards empowering ecosystems to scale. So most people on this call are probably familiar with a Tao. It stands for the three letters: decentralized autonomous organization or organism. And Haifa, as a community of storytellers and programmers and thinkers and creators learned about the blockchain, learned about that the blockchain is something quite magnificent. It's quite beautiful. And I've described it as like Bitcoin as the first example that's present in the blockchain when people think about currency. It's a magic piece of paper. Bitcoin is a magic piece of paper, and this magic piece of paper records what's happening, and we don't have to wonder if the recording is accurate. It's permanent, it's reliable. And if we take that in, what could we create with such a magic piece of paper? Well, they added a few rules to their magic piece of paper, which said their magic piece of paper could be divided into as many magic pieces of paper as you might ever want. And there's no cost to divide the paper. And then they added another rule because they're building structure on top of this, this magic piece of paper. And the rule that they said is that these pieces of paper are going to have a number on them. And the numbers have rules. They are always 0 or greater, so they're positive numbers. And the total of all the numbers on all the pieces of paper, no matter how many times you break them up into smaller pieces of paper, the total will always be 21 million. And they said, if we design a magic piece of paper in systems that are totally reliable and trusted, and a community believes and feels that reliable characteristic, how could this be helpful? How might it help with the world? And that's what the Bitcoin algorithm, the Bitcoin network is these pieces of paper. And the only thing you can do with these pieces of paper is you can take a little bit off of my number and add it to somebody else's piece of paper. That's the only thing you can do. But it already welcomed in a revolution of creativity and thought and possibility. It had some troubles because, in particular, to keep this lovely invention going, we spend $5 to $10 billion a year on electricity. That's not exactly sustainable. We concentrate the power in those that have more computers than those that have less computers. Not so great. But it opened up a possibility. So the blockchain ecosystems expanded, and we got to the second generation and now the third generation of blockchain. And those magic pieces of paper have gotten very, very clever and very creative. And a DAO is a group of people that come together and say, we are going to have a new way of making agreements with each other. We're going to have a new way of sharing values, of agreeing to what is value. We're going to have full transparency in the conversation, in the way that voting and governance takes place. And we're going to make decisions together to allocate resources through these agreement spaces. And so DAOs are in the creation of the seeds ecosystem. The organization Haifa, which was a community of 100 people all around the world learning to work with each other, said, collaboration and facilitation and coordination is a really important thing. And so they spent a lot of time building what is now called the Haifa DAO, the tools, and it is only in the last few months that it's beginning to go out into the world. The seeds ecosystem is not a specific organization, a specific community doing decision-making, but rather it's a full ecosystem of governance tools that are surrounding a token that represents value that we call a seed. And so the way that I imagine this works in the world is it's kind of amazing. First of all, if I have a token that somehow represents value and I can send it to the most impoverished community in the world without any middleman in 1/10 of a second with no fee, and if that is an energetic transmission of value from this point on the world to another point on the world, and that empowers something to happen, then all we need to do is shine a light as to where the needs are, and those values can flow. So I'm going to conclude with this introduction. The seeds ecosystem is a community of communities. And at the local level, a community comes together for purpose. They will read the seeds constitution and see the values that are inspired in there of thrivability and co-creation and transparency and universal oneness. and a community someplace on the planet will come together, and they will organize themselves to make decisions as to what they believe is valuable, what they want to measure in their community, whether it's carbon in the ground, music festivals, lack of poverty, availability of local food, whatever the things that they measure. When you measure something, then you can communicate it. And so if two communities have come together beautifully, achieving purpose, achieving the same outcomes, they're building templates, they're building frameworks, they're showing us a map. And if one community on a tiny little island shows the map to only themselves, they've missed out on the real value that they create for all. It is in the storytelling. It is in the sharing of what has been learned. So if you have two communities creating the same local results and one shares it because it's part of an ecosystem of communities, and that happens in a transparent way, in agreements between communities, that's what the seeds ecosystem is working to facilitate. And when those communities are able to tell their stories and share them, then value flows that recognize the outcomes, the improvements to the diversity and the balance and living in capacity with nature, the flows will be able to see that that's happening, and they will empower more of it. And the seeds ecosystem from an economic standpoint is designed as new value is coming in. That new value is distributed in an uneven way towards regenerative action. When the Fed prints new money, it's distributed in a certain way according to the rules of the Fed or governments or fiat worlds. They distribute it according to a certain rules. When we're building a new ecosystem on the blockchain, using tokens and using collective governance, we can build into the agreements how new value arriving in the ecosystem flows towards the outcomes that are creating the greatest results for all. That's the intention.
I have to jump in because what you're doing is so complementary to what we're doing. It just feels like a really natural thing to talk. I feel like I'm almost going to talk from the opposite end and we meet in the middle. It's so exciting to hear. I've seen your website. It's absolutely beautiful. I must say I was very impressed by that. So I'm going to explain a little bit about Love To. I'm going to talk about Love To Be Bright Green, which is, it's a mutual company. It's useful to know that's a type of cooperative company. So it's owned by its members. And the members in Love To Be Bright Green are what we call producers, who are the people who regenerate and protect land. So regenerative farmers, people who conserve and protect nature. And the other members are investors, and they could be institutional investors, like huge institutions, or they could be mum and dads, investing a little bit of their pension money. And they all sit in this organization together, and they all have one vote each. So an investor could put $1 billion into it. They still only get one vote, so they can't overwhelm the whole organization. And everyone's sitting in the same organization looking for the same result, basically. And I'm kind of feeding a little bit off all of your excitement there, Mark. But what we do basically is we found a way, we have a way of measuring ecological improvement. But instead of what's often happening now is like we try to put a value on a whale or on a tree or on a wombat. We have wombats in Australia. And it doesn't make sense because a tree, you could say this tree is worth $100,000 or $10,000, but that tree has no value without the ecosystem that it's in. And that whale, apparently, a forest elephant is now considered to be worth $1.75 million because of the carbon it sequesters or something like this. Like, that's a nonsense, complete nonsense. It's like it turns that elephant into a piece of something we can put a value on, completely separate from its ecosystem. But without its ecosystem, it'll be dead. So it will have no value whatsoever. So we actually looked at the way we value things, and instead of valuing pieces of nature and trying to chop it all up into bits, which just doesn't work in my mind. Nature's sacred, and its value is infinite, and we must respect that in everything that we're doing. And we are a part of nature. We're not separate from it. So we fall under the same rules. And so we decided to look at improvement and also conservation of nature, because there are ways of doing that. And then to value what people do in order to improve and protect nature, because we understand about valuing what people do. We value that every single day. And what we've done, because the big challenge in this is that if you want to reach big money, if you want to actually really put massive amounts of money into regenerative farming, for example, simple example, you have to meet the requirements of the people and the institutions that manage that money. If you say, I hate everyone who's involved with big money, I'm not going to speak to them, that's fine, but you will not access their money. It's really simple. If you compromise all your values and say, okay, I'll do whatever you need me to do, I'll do, you sacrifice regeneration, nature, ecology, and all those other things that are important. So we've actually got to learn how to speak to each other. And that's what we did in Love To. We figured out a way to be able to package the incredible value that regenerative farmers and conservationists produce through their work, through what they love to do. That's why it's called Love To. They love to look after nature. And we package that into a financial product which completely talks the language of financial institutions. So shares and options, everyday stuff for financial people that they can relate to. We de-risked it in ways that they need it to be de-risked, because they hate risk. They're terrified of floods and fires and disasters because that ruins their investment. So we managed to de-risk all of that stuff. And we made it scalable, because at the moment they have sometimes the minimum investment is $1 billion. And a farm typically might want 500,000, $1 million, maybe 5 million, if it's a big one. So they literally can't speak to each other. They're like on different planets. And so what we do is we aggregate lots of farmers together who produce incredible value, and we turn that into a big asset that speaks the language of the financial markets. And then they can invest 10 million, 100 million, $1 billion at a time, whatever it is that speaks their language according to their size and their scale. And so we bring this world of beautiful small farms and people who conserve nature and original peoples who've been living and caring for land for generations. We bring that together with those huge, hungry financial markets. And we just say that's the biggest farmers market in the world. And we're bringing the farmers to their biggest market directly. We're not middlemen, because we're all members of the same organization. So we actually just bring them into the same marketplace so that one lot are buying, the other lot's investment. The farmers have invested, the people with the money invest, we all invest in the regeneration and protection of nature. So it's so obvious when I listen to you, Marc, it's like, oh my goodness, you're doing pieces that would fit so beautifully with what we're doing. So there's clearly another conversation to be had there.
Well, part of the mission accomplished, I would say. Inspiration there. Emanuel, would you like to?
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, that was great stuff, Marc and Sara. I think in 5 minutes, I better understood the value of blockchain technology than I have in years of trying to get my brain around it, like what this really is. So thank you for that moment of enlightenment. And likewise, Sara, you're infiltrating financial markets with the concept of love and understanding. And as we contemplate this grand systemic change, and I salute you both for working on the top progressive end of that, I think it behooves us to go back to also very basic levels of understanding of what value is in the core of the human soul. And for many of us, that has been lost, not because we're not aware of it. It's in our heart and soul, but we have been so culturally conditioned and socialized to think otherwise, that to really make these mechanisms effective, we have to change everyone, the psyche of humankind on a very base level to reconnect what is the true value of our own purpose and spirit and lives. You know, we've been indoctrinated by social Darwinism. We've been indoctrinated since we were cavemen. Back then, we were fighting for survival, quite literally. And Darwin took that and emphasized it and made us all think that we're in this struggle for existence with limited resources. And although we know in our hearts that's not true, the evidence on the surface sure seems that way. And we've been socialized to believe that, you know, Darwin was right. And if we become altruistic, we're not looking out for ourselves. That's contrary to the fight for survival. That's not what we should be doing. And this has turned us into this desperate struggle for resources in our own minds, which of course isn't true, but we've certainly been conditioned that way. But now as we see the system breaking down, and we see climate change before our very eyes, and we see billions in poverty and resources not being fairly distributed, and the planet really in critical throes of a premature death, what do we think? And we think maybe we can turn Darwin on his head. Because if this is a struggle for survival, then what's going to have to emerge in a biological and evolutionary thinking way is we got to get together. We've got to share. We've got to find that nature of altruism in our hearts, because that is now what our survival depends on. And if we're all fighting against each other and grabbing for limited resources and valuing that, we're going to lose. And the road's going to be very dark. But if we go back to our true roots, it's been shown that babies are altruistic by nature. They share, they laugh, they love the companion of other babies. That's the way we really are. Let's go back to our own babyhood, to our own initial natural responses, and understand that our struggle for survival really depends on us coming together again, finding that altruism in our hearts and giving value to that. And it may not be money, but it is talent. And every single individual human being has a talent. And that talent is their purpose. And that has indescribable value. And what we need to do is go back, give our gratitude for whatever talents we have, and put them to work in alignment with our whole purpose. Share that with others with no transactional value being involved, but doing it out of the good of their hearts. And maybe that, as systemic change at the grassroots level, will really change the whole psychic concept of what being a human being in the 21st century is all about, and give us the foundation for these systems that we're describing to flourish into the future.
Emanuel, you sparked something in me that it's never occurred to me before, actually. I don't know if this is valid, but it feels important to say it. Like, what if the whole narrative we're saying at the moment about the struggle for survival is actually a kind of final expression of that Darwinistic perspective, and we're not actually in a struggle for survival? That's the lens through which we're experiencing our story, because that's the lens through which we've lived our whole life, and that actually we're in something different, At one level, of course, it's obviously we are definitely in a phase of evolution. But what if we actually let go of the language of the struggles for survival, and even the computer language of an upgrade or of an evolutionary step is the dominant narrative? Because my sense is that if we feel we're in a struggle for survival, we're trying to get people to behave in ways like to fight against their own nature, rather than to expand into that fundamental nature, which you describe so beautifully as babies and as adults. Actually, like, we all have it in us to love and to share and to recognize value in others. We have that. We have the other side as well. What if reframing that narrative so that we just don't keep telling that story, I'm in a struggle for survival. We tell a story that we are evolving. Evolving is sometimes very uncomfortable. There's a lot of letting go of old ways of being and old ways of doing, and we are attached to them because they're so familiar. That's our old energy. But there is a new energy coming through. It is inevitable. It is impossible to stop evolution. It is impossible to stop the flow of universe life energy through us as humans and through our planet in its living being. And when we shift that narrative, we're able to find naturally those parts of ourselves that hunger for evolution, rather than the parts of ourselves that fight to hold on to what we've known in the past. And it orientates us then in a more graceful way towards the kind of changes that we all recognize. I think even people who are quite lost in today's world, somewhere in themselves, they know, as we all know, that love is better than all the other stuff that we let get in the way of it. Because, most people have kids and parents and brothers and sisters and friends, and we know that language. We need some support to more gently let those parts of ourselves become the stronger parts, whatever is going on in the world, whatever the struggle, that the death struggle of the old order is. That can be very noisy and uncomfortable, but there is something new coming in, which is very beautiful. And yeah, thank you so much for at least helping me to see that and share what I was seeing.
Well, thank you for clarifying my point, because you just explained it very well. So that was a very lovely accent on what I was trying to say. Appreciate it.
And two things that come up for me through this are firstly, that I think what demonstrated really well in the plenary today in Oroville, when they were showing that people were living impoverished, but they had a lot of land, but they didn't know that they could they could dig wells to make the water and plant a few trees, and that land could be very productive and flourishing for them with food forests all around them, and they would be able to. So there was this added value stream of that education and that learning, and that there was so much value there, but it was invisible. And so by making the value of the land and the ecosystem visible to those people through doing it with them and for volunteers and education, that created their own abundance. And a lot of that work was through volunteers and altruism, and it's very inspiring. And they are saying that the volunteerism was a big part of the motivator, that the managers volunteer and then the people volunteer, and it builds on each other. And on the other side of that, I think of sort of in Western society, we are not ready to trust yet to just jump into the giving economy with no transactions and I do all this good work, but I'm not earning something for my end of life or my pension. So I think that there's this bridge with these systems like seeds that take that invisible value that we're creating and give it a number and an account, so you can see it and transact with it, and so you can trust. Because that trust that we've lost in the universe, we trust in our numbers and our accounts. And I see it as a bridge. Like, we need that get the majority of the people shifting over into this abundance and altruism framework. So that's what I wanted to share. So thank you.
I want to take it from there, if that's okay.
Mhm.
Yes,
So
good.
the transactional nature is okay. It's okay that, when I go and I'm taking care of the plants, or today we were shredding down our 12 feet of cover crop so that it can mature into the ground and be the soil for next year. When I'm doing something, it's a transaction because I'm offering something and the world is improved. Something has changed. That's transactional in nature. It does not have to be altruistic versus economic. That we are always collaborating, and what we are looking to achieve are through collaboration, through effortless collaboration, through facilitated collaboration. We want the world to be alive and abundant and vibrant and fragrant for all. That's what and all is not just the humans, but it's everything. And so what we're talking about is if we can dream and imagine what that looks like, people and systems and resources are moving around, and outcomes of beauty and joy and music and art and culture and in balance with nature's capacities are taking place. Behind all of those things, there doesn't really have to be numbers. There don't then have to be US dollars. There doesn't have to be that stuff. What has to be is the fluid facilitation and coordination and appreciation. And so when you use the word bridge, the question is how do we bridge? So Sarah, you're speaking about bridging where a capital infrastructure flow is familiar with certain language, is familiar with certain requirements. And if those requirements are met, then the capital can flow. But one question that I always have with the traditional capital world is capital flows, but capital is always looking for an exit strategy too. And the exit strategy of capital is disruptive when its flow is needed over here. And so when we think about the what gets kind of created when we use collaborative tools like blockchain and so forth, is that if someone is doing something altruistic and it's beautiful, and if it is honored with an appreciation token, a token of love, a token of gratitude, then they can then channel that. They then have the authority to flow that value that they just received love. They just received appreciation from the community, appreciation from the ecosystem, and they can direct where it can be most healing, where it can be most beneficial. Maybe that's to improve the roof on their house that's leaking. Maybe that is to make sure that a person in this other community 3,000 kilometers away, needs to have some food. And so they can just send that appreciation token through the ether and it'll arrive where it's going. So one of the things that I do spend a lot of time thinking about is what does the transition look like? If at the beginning there's just one community that is a shining beacon, some people will see that. And then if there's lots of mushrooms emerging and flowering all around the world, then there's safe spaces where more people will notice them. And as the financial systems and the world systems that are taking place today are no longer serving the outcomes desired, energy is going to want to flow and it needs to find a place to go to, not because it's going to exit afterwards, but because it's going to empower the outcomes that they want as well. And so that's kind of where I spent some time thinking about is like, how does the money, how does that energy of that money flow someplace, not for the purpose of an immediate return or a 3-year bond that's going to have these characteristics, but there's an exit at it, but that it empowers and continues to flow. And that's one of the economic designs that we spend a lot of time thinking about is how do you see the flow? And how should that flow? Where is the magnets? What are the magnets? Where is the flow needed? And can the ecosystem on its own flow that value where it needs to be by design?
What if it's a both and?
It is a both and.
Because
Absolutely, it's a both and.
it's not necessarily the case that capital always needs an exit. Venture capital needs an exit if they're investing in a company. But what if it's designed so that they don't need an exit? And what if what they need is a return, a marketed competitive return, but they do need a yield, they need a dividend. We make shares because they produce a dividend because that satisfies what they need. So
it satisfies one element of what they need, but yes, I agree.
Yes. And somebody, a company that wants to invest in a company to get a fast exit, that's not our customer, but the big capital, there's a lot of capital beyond that. So I think if you think about it, let's think about all the money that is at the moment sitting in gold, like in vaults all over the world that can be frozen by a government at a moment's notice or can literally be taken away from you. It's kind of like, it's like stuck in these dark places. How much more capital there is like that? We talk about bringing capital to life. It's kind of like it needs to come to life. It needs to find that it actually can get what it's looking for, or actually the people and the institutions can get what they're looking for by being invested into things that are into living ecosystems and into the health and well-being also of human beings and the good things that people do. So I think, Marc, that there's a both and here, and that it really is possible to work with, I don't think I know this. Look, let's just put a few facts around this. There are literally, it's maybe approximately, it's very difficult to get this accurate, but at least $4.5 trillion a year have been mandated to be invested in environmental and social improvement every year since the Paris Accord and the Sustainable Development Goals, COP26. There are mandates coming out all the time for the large institutions, the sovereign wealth funds, the pension funds, large corporations. And in future, every stock exchange is going to require all listed companies to report on their ESG performance, love it or hate it. The expression ESG, I do not love it, and I do not love what it stands for, but it's very useful for us because they're going to have to report on it, which means they're going to actually have to do something about it. And my view is, if we give them a pathway and you give them a pathway to do something good with it, even if they're doing bad things still, let's put it in a very polarizing language, they're doing bad stuff over here, polluting or whatever, but some of their money starts to do something that is genuinely grassroots, real deal good over here. That must be better than they keep doing bad things and they greenwash over there. At least let's start to clean the money. Let's clean the energy of that money. I think really, like, money laundering just got applied in the wrong place because it does need a kind of laundering. It needs to be cleaned up. Ken Honda talks about happy money. We need more happy money in the world. And that's what I feel is possible. And that's what we're seeing now. Like, we've actually, our system is now in the early stages of working. We're in the early stages of bringing the capital. We've done the evaluation to make the whole thing flow. So it's very exciting to see that actually beginning to work.
There's a lot of metrics that I think can be woven into a system. And I've thought about, when the money that's sitting in gold, it needs to receive a yield, as you say, and it can move into this new ecosystem with that, as you say, $4 to $4.5 trillion is flowing someplace.
Or actually, it's not flowing at the moment because they have nothing to invest in, so they don't invest it. It's really simple. It just they have these huge portfolios. They're just looking for somewhere to put their money. I hear about organizations with $1 billion that need to be invested and they have nowhere to put it, or multiple billions of dollars have to be invested this way and they can't find anything to put it into. It's extraordinary.
That's because the ecosystems at scale to match that scope are not yet developed, and the blockchain and the on-the-ground verifiability, those things can be recorded and attached to a token, attached to a community, attached to land, attached to activity that then could flow into an aggregated token.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And so you start off with one mushroom performing beautiful outcomes, improved quality of land, quality of water, whatever are those things that you measure. And that token represents what you actually want to achieve. So if we look at a community, an ecosystem, a large farm, however you partition it, if you are looking at the outcomes that you want, the improvements that you want, and you equate that numerically to a token, now you have something that, in fact, becomes then the question of what is the value of this token? We know that we have the outcomes we want. How much capital is necessary to flow into this token to maintain those results and to create liquidity around this ecosystem that's performing this service?
And to stimulate more of it. Yep,
and to
absolutely.
stimulate more of it,
Yep.
and to tell the stories between each of these communities. The small permaculture farm community in Africa that has access to land and has access to impoverished land that can be dramatically improved for the benefit of their community, and it is sequestering carbon, and it's improving water, and it's improving poverty problems. All that they need is to be able to measure those kinds of improvements and have it tokenized. So then you have to make it easy for the capital to flow there.
We're
The
talking the
billion-dollar
same
capital,
language.
yeah, the billion-dollar
Totally.
capital can flow there at the decision of someone who has the control of the $1 billion. But when you look at the flow throughout the whole ecosystem of the people that are caring, that are contributing to the outcomes that we want, the more beautiful world that we want to be bubbling up, all of those people can receive gratitude tokens of appreciation in the ecosystem, that then they become the philanthropists. They become at each scale, at every scale. And so that's what a DAO and that's what a token can recognize, because you can empower into the decision making of the DAO the emission of tokens in response to verified activity, whether it's improving soil or water, or just that we put on a totally beautiful spiritual festival, including music and wisdom from the earth, and everybody was improved. Yep. That should emit tokens too.
Absolutely. And yeah, and then you enable a kind of banking, direct banking for people who are currently unbanked.
And one of the things, and this is going to sound like a very practical and pragmatic and silly kind of thing, but you have to answer the question, I am in a community, I am creating value, the community recognizes that value, and I decided I'm going to move to someplace else. You have to answer the question of how does that value that I've created in the community move with me? You can't have a single global money. A single global money is a very big challenge. But you can have beautiful money that is local to the space, local to the land, to the people that are there. And it's representative of the actual value that's being created. And it becomes this story of beauty because the story is shared. But I'm a plumber in that town. And I've been being a plumber in the town for the last 10 years, and I have now 5,000 tokens. I have something. But I'm moving to San Francisco, or I'm moving to Ecuador. I'm moving. How do I take that with me? We have to have each of these communities part of a global ecosystem of communities so that value can flow. And those transactional value bridges are called liquidity. Yeah. The liquidity to leave and to the liquidity to invest into an ecosystem. You can invest directly into an ecosystem, or you can invest into the fluidity and the liquidity that surrounds an ecosystem. These are just things that are mathematical constructs on top of the blockchain that we can build. We know how to build these kinds of things.
Can I just ask Emanuel to give voice to, so that we kind of like, it's lovely to see your excitement, both of you. So I'm imagining that's going to continue, and I look forward to also be part of that conversation. But I'd just like to hear, Emanuel, how you're seeing this also from your perspective and your experience. Also perhaps from what you've been doing with Greenheart, with Purpose Earth, and with how you weave your spiritual practice into that.
Thank you,
or
Anne-Marie.
anything else that you want. I mean, this
Yeah.
is what I was curious about when I was listening to them and looking at you,
Yeah.
but you might want to say something else.
Yeah, I would love to. Well, I will say this. I do. I've been a great beneficiary of the economic system, more by chance abundance, I would say, than certainly not intention. I've been an entrepreneur in nonprofits. And so the idea wasn't to make money. The idea was to find right livelihood. And that's what I often say to everyone. Do what's right for you. It may take decades, it may take a long time ago to do it, but that value will come back to you if you're practicing your right livelihood, utilizing your purpose, your talent for the right cause that makes the most sense to you and you can be most effective. So that is the key thing. But I don't want us to lose sight of the deep spiritual nature, because as a beneficiary of the economic system, the only thing I can think at this point in my life is, how do I pay it back? How do I give it back? How do I be grateful to the world for everything it's given to me? And I think this sense is deep rooted in us. We do lose sight of it, but I would put a call out there to the beneficiaries of the old economic system to put it to work. And you don't always have to take your value with you. In fact, leave it in the community. You don't have to take your money and run. Better to leave it on the table and let somebody else play with that. And in the end of the day, it is, along with right livelihood, the ultimate goal is sort of the bodhisattva vow, that when you've benefited, when you've seen the light, when you've come to understand your purpose and what you're doing in life, and all is well, you don't take your money. You stand at the threshold of your understanding and you share it with every other sentient being and living thing on the planet until they all see and understand it too. And then we all enter the new economic nirvana as one, together, as the giant Tao that I've called the Holomovement, bringing us back home to oneness and unity.
Thank you, Emanuel. Yes. That really touches me, because what I was wondering, indeed, we did some work also with Bernard Lietaer about the yin and the yang money, as we called it at that time. Also, I saw honoring Barbara Marx Hubbard's Wheel of Co-Creation, and we will be continuing some of these explorations with Sara in October. And there it was. We really saw that there is this dance between what we also spoke about the more the yin money and the yang money. But what I was sensing myself when I was listening to you, Marc and Sara, there was something in me also coming about like, do I all the time have to consider what my value is in such a way that you can make an exchange? And that's also, of course, part of me, but there's something about just following my heart and wanting to serve and to be grateful and to see. So the value that I see has to do with that I see the light spark in Kara's eyes because she's enjoying something so much, or that we're doing something. And whether or not it comes to something, the fact that it is making her heart sing in the moment is for me enough. And to then see how, I understand we need to do that, but I also have this sense of, okay, can we also, be more in a flow? And how would that work? The most important thing, though, is for me, indeed, that we do find not only that, but also the systems and structures, of course. And that's what you're working for, and that's what I'm very grateful for. And there is somehow in me also this challenge about how do I stay with it, although I'm in such a privileged place as I am here in the West, in the Netherlands, and in my conditions. And how do I then serve and bring forth whatever I can in the whole? And I think that's what you also pointed towards, Emanuel. How can we really give back whatever we can and wherever we are? So I'm really curious. I'm really excited to see how this further evolves and how to go. And I'm noticing the time. I think we need to be aware of that, don't we, Cara? Let me hand over to you so that you can structure us in a way that we can come to not a closure, but well.
Yes, we have 10 minutes. So I do want to pull the thread. I don't know if we have enough time, but I want. I guess I just want to do a little storytelling around Sara and Marc's, and then maybe you can just correct me, maybe if I interpret it right or wrong. So on Sara's website, I saw there was people grazing with cattle, and they were doing it the normal way, and then they had some learning and some investment come in, and then they learned how to do a sort of a rotated grazing, and then that their grasslands are now thriving compared to all the other grasslands. And because of the investment coming in,
they did that because they love to do it. They really care about nature and the land. So the usual story in this is that people sometimes use their own money, their own resources, their own heart to do it. That's the whole point, is that at the moment people do it because they love to.
Yes, and that's a small number of people who've kind of figured that out, but does the big capital then help more people do it that good way?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then with seeds, you gift seeds to communities like permaculture farms, and then they receive those seeds, and then that gives them the ability to pay people and trade with people for food within their community, and that sort of boosts them up. Instead of thinking, oh, we can't do it because we don't have any money, think, well, we've got these seeds now, so we can get things going and people will accept them and maybe trade them on in the future. And so it just gives that boost into the abundance mindset from the scarcity mindset. You can maybe tweak that for me, Marc.
I think that's certainly the element of generosity from an ecosystem, because the ecosystem is flowing the capital into the places where it can be where collectively it can provide the greatest value. But I think that one of the most magical parts is that it then becomes available for anybody to flow. Anybody can flow. Right now, if a regular person living in Manhattan wants to help a community someplace far away, they don't know how to do it. They don't have the pathway. And so that's part of what the ecosystem is making available.
Okay. And then the Holomovement, Emanuel, it's like the bigger scope where it's saying, if you have an open heart and you want to make the world a better place, but you don't know how, like, where do you come in, and how do we find each other and do our best together? What would you say?
Well, there are a lot of ways you can do it. Volunteerism is one. Maybe you don't even have the time. I would say to once some of our marketing people at Greenheart, when I was trying to describe the Holomovement, and they said, well, who's your target audience? And I said, well, the 7.5 billion people on the planet, which wasn't the answer that a good marketing person wanted to hear, but that's what I really feel in my heart, that it is. It's everyone. And if you have nothing at all, no time, no money, you're not broke. You have a wealth of human spirit within you. And you can begin with your first act as a random act of kindness. Just do something nice and good for someone else with no expectations for return, and eliminate all transactions in your own mind. And you know what? The experiments have been done on random acts of kindness. And most of us who, if we ever do that, we really don't think it does any good. But when they ask the recipients of random act of kindness, there's an 80% more appreciation of that, maybe from the mere fact that it's random and it's kind and it's out of the blue. And I was sitting here having a miserable day until somebody came and gave me a cupcake. So, one of my mentors in the past, George Leonard, once said, don't hoard yourself. Give it away. Be the best you can and give it out with your whole heart and soul. And that is the biggest, highest value gift that we can all give.
Maybe so. It is so. I think that's also part of what we're doing here in Peace Week. And I just want to honor us all that are contributing to this and creating this and making this possible. And especially, of course, the team that is really doing a lot of effort to make it like that. And to see how this can be a learning platform and a place where we can enjoy that and further improve and also see what kind of conditions we can create that can support people to come up with that, which you're also mentioning, Emanuel, to give that random act of kindness.
Can I add something in here? It'll be short. I want to invite everybody here to really go into your heart and ask yourself, with all the beliefs and all the consciousness and spirituality and everything that you have and you are, whether it is right and whether it feels good for the good people who do good, to remain unrewarded, that our valuation system doesn't actually reward that. And therefore we continue with a valuation system that is out of alignment with our core values as human beings? Or is it possible that we could have those random acts of kindness and recognizing the twinkle in Kara's eye and all the beautiful moments of human beings, and that people who do good for life could be generously rewarded for that, so that they're able to share that generosity more widely? Because if we don't receive and keep receiving, we are not easily able to keep giving. Now, we can receive many things. It's not only money. Money is one currency. There are many currencies. But in the peace movement and the related movements, I really feel we must ask ourselves whether we could have a relationship with money that would allow us to receive generously for the good work that we do, in order for our economy and our fundamental systems on this planet to shift into a direction that supports thriving, and not to throw our spirit out, but to do that with spirit.
Mm.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. What I can just feel in the field, that as there's the great turning and the great unraveling, there's kind of this empty space in the middle of this. I of this tornado where we meet in the void and open ourselves to creating what is next for the world, and in great service, in letting the divine and the ancient and the future mix and mingle in our souls and our hearts and our hands, and sing together a new song, a song that brings us all home. So, thank you. Big hearts out to everyone. Thank you for all the plenary watchers. And this was, concludes us for this last session of this Trello board day, even though it's many days around the world. And super thanks for Ben for arriving here at the end. Big love, brother.